Now, last night, the city of Baltimore had completely removed all the statues in the city honoring the Confederacy. Now, the Hill reports that the Baltimore City Council on Monday had approved a measure to remove the statues, and crews began work removing them at 11:30 p.m. Tuesday night. That is quick and efficient government right there. Oh, you want to remove these statues? Yes. Gone. That night. Gone. By 5:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, all 4 of the statues were completely removed, according to the city's mayor, Catherine Pugh. She said, she told the Sun on Wednesday morning, "It's done. They need to come down. My concern is for the safety and security of our people. We moved as quickly as we could." Damn. Now, the city decision, of course, came in the wake of the deadly Charlottesville, Virginia rally, where, of course, white supremacists and neo-Nazis marched to protest the planned removal of a Confederate statue in a city park. And to that, I say, good. And then I wonder, why the fuck did it take so long? Look, I know I just gave them credit for immediately removing these in like one day. But seriously, why are there still Confederate monuments up? Those are like the ultimate participation trophy. Hey, you're in a war, you rebelled against America, you got your ass kicked. Here's a statue. Participation trophy. Snowflake losers. Look, it's amazing to me that right now, there are still places with these statues up. Statues of traitors to America. They literally betrayed America. The Confederacy, again, they weren't part of America. It was trying to be its own country. And literally, in order to break away from this country, they fought and killed Americans. Those are people that didn't want to be Americans anymore. They didn't want to be part of our country. No, they wanted to break away and create their own country where they had slaves. And I'm not saying that every single Confederate soldier was bad. A lot of them were poor farmers. However, that doesn't discount the fact that they were literally fighting to preserve the institution of slavery. Now, I'm sure some of them thought, hey, one of these days, I'm a poor farmer now, but one of these days, I'm going to be a rich farmer and I'm going to own slaves. I'm sure some of them felt that way, and I'm sure that's why some of them fought. So we shouldn't be venerating their cause or any of their generals. For example, Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee, by the way, look, there is this myth surrounding him that he's the kindly general, right? Not a kindly general. Now, he was a decent tactician and a decent general, but turns out he was actually a terrible human being. Now, for example, he split up slave families. He'd have runaway slaves returned and whipped, and their wounds poured with salt. In fact, look, here's what he believed about slavery. Now, a lot of people are like, no, but he was against slavery. He was kind of an abolitionist. Really? No. Here's what he believed. And here's a quote from him. He said, I think it, however, a greater evil to the white man than the black race, referring to slavery. And while my feelings are strongly enlisted in behalf of the latter, my sympathies are more strong for the former. Oh, he's got sympathy. Now, here's what he says. The blacks are immeasurably better off here than in Africa, morally, socially, and physically. So wait a minute. He believes that, oh man, I care so much about my slaves that I want them here because it turns out they're better off here in chains than they are back in Africa, where we stole them from. It's better in America, man. Hey, man, we did you a favor. We did you a solid. Here's more. And if you don't understand how disgusting that is, well, let me continue. He said the painful discipline they are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race, and I hope will prepare and lead them to better things. How long their subjugation may be necessary is known and ordered by a wise, merciful providence. Their emancipation will sooner result from the mild and melting influence of Christianity than the storms and tempests of fiery controversy. So, what he's saying is that the discipline, it's good. It's good when we whip them. It's good when we pour salt in their wounds. It teaches them discipline. See, they're like our children. They're not very smart. They're not equal to us. They're our kids, almost. Except they're not like kids. But we're raising them to not be savages anymore. We're raising them to be better people by keeping them in chains and making them do all of our labor. And of course, what we get in return is the knowledge that we're enlightening an inferior race, and also free labor. For them, it's a win-win, man. They get free labor. It's such a grotesque justification. And furthermore, he said that God will eventually emancipate them once they've learned, once they've raised themselves up while being in our chains. When would that happen exactly? 100 years from then? 200 years? 1,000 years? No. This seems very awfully convenient to you and other slave owners, this justification is. And look, this is an example of one kind of person who was in the Confederacy. That whole country, by the way, was being built on the premise of keeping slavery. Every state that left did so because they wanted to protect slavery as an institution. Their economy was based on it. So, it's in their secession documents. Look it up. Jefferson Davis also said that the cornerstone of our country is built on the idea that the black man, that the Negro, is not equal to the white man and deserves to be in subjugation. That they built that country on that. You can't say that it's not about slavery. They spell it out very clearly. But back to the removal of the statues. Now, I see all sorts of posts and I see all sorts of arguments over social media, and some even in the comments right now, that say that removing these statues is removing history. You are erasing our history. No. You're not erasing history. What you're doing is you're removing a monument. See, monuments are meant to glorify people. Okay? Think of the, Washington Monument, right? It's built to glorify George Washington. Look at the Lincoln Monument. It's built to glorify Abraham Lincoln. Look at the Mount Rushmore. You don't just carve a giant face onto the side of a mountain for history. Like, oh, it's just so people remember George Washington. No, it's to glorify them. It's to glorify them. That's what building a monument is all about. So it's sort of a ridiculous thing saying, no. This statue that makes this person look incredibly flattering. I mean, riding on a horse and looking all heroic and badass, maybe carrying a flag. No, that's just history. It doesn't glorify them at all. No, and the person, like the people that they're glorifying are people who were racists and white supremacists who literally fought against America to create their own fucking country. Now, on erasing, nobody's taking these people out of the history books. No, actually, we want the opposite. We want to put the real truth about them into the history books. And now, why do I say that? Real truth. When you're talking about a history book's a history book, right? No. The problem is that over the last century, perhaps even more, there's been a concerted effort to whitewash the history books, to make sure that what we're teaching the next generation isn't true. It's literal propaganda. Talking about the benevolent slave owner. Let me tell you what, there is nothing benevolent about owning slaves. They've changed all sorts of things in some of the history books in Texas, and I've covered stories about this. Okay? And so, unfortunately, we have, again, whitewashed it. I mean, and look at some of the reasons they put for the Civil War. Oh, it's states' rights. Taxation. It's about taxation. No, it wasn't. It was, I mean, okay, you could argue in some way it was about states' rights. The state right to do what? Own people. For people inside the state to own other human beings. Come on, man. Come on. Oh, it's a war of northern aggression. No, it was a war to save the Union. Look, Abraham Lincoln, he originally didn't go to war to free the slaves. No, he went to war to save the Union. Abolition, even though he was a known abolitionist, That wasn't his reason for going to war. His reason was, I want to save the United States. And if I have to make some concessions in order to do that, then I will do that. Now, he didn't have to do that, thankfully, and he was able to free the slaves afterwards. But he did this to keep America together. That's the truth of it. But look, that's what I'm saying, that there's been a long-standing propaganda campaign to whitewash the history of slavery in the South. To make it seem that they weren't so bad. And that slaves weren't treated so badly. In fact, they were treated very, very well, much, much better than they did in Africa. It's exactly what Robert E. Lee was saying. Oh, they're so much better now here. I mean, look at all the opportunity they have. They just had to suffer and change for a couple hundred years. That's fine. But again, there's nothing benevolent about owning other human beings, whipping and raping them, and denying them basic freedoms. This campaign, by the way, peaked during Jim Crow and during the Civil Rights era. And you remember the Civil Rights era, like after the war, the Confederate flag, we hadn't seen it. Like it was gone. You know when it came back? During civil rights. So, and of course, it was adopted as a symbol of white supremacy, a symbol of racism. And of course, that's also when a lot of these monuments started coming up, started being built. And they did it to intimidate minorities. By removing these, we're actually rectifying a great mistake. If you want to preserve the history, go to a museum. Go to a museum, you put the shit in a museum where it belongs, in its proper context. That's even what Robert E. Lee's great-great-grandson is saying. Hey, we don't agree with white supremacists. We don't agree with the KKK. We don't agree with the Nazis. What we want, and we don't even agree with these monuments being up. What we want is to put these into a museum in its proper context, to show the horrors of slavery. So, and I think that's the best way to deal with this, so that we can remember the truth about the Civil War, so that we never, ever repeat the mistakes of the past. The only reason to defend the statue is not to defend the history, but it's to glorify that history. That's why it's time for all these monuments to go, and for us to put the history of the racist Confederacy where it belongs. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.